Hey there, and welcome to another episode of JavaScript Jabber. This week on our panel, we have AJ O'Neill.
Yo, 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 coming at you live from the heat room.
Dan Shapir.
Hey from Tel Aviv, I'm alive. Did you miss me?
I did.
Yeah. Steve Edwards.
Yo, only one yo, not yo, 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 from Cloudy and Cool Portland.
I'm Charles Max Wood from Top End Devs. We got a little bit of sprinkled rain. I think it's a little over freezing here, so it's cold. But yeah, great to be here. We have a special guest. That is Gal Weizman.
Hey guys.
I didn't get your pronunciation thing to load, so
you nailed it. Gal Weizman is just about right. Yeah, coming from Tel Aviv as well.
Good deal.
Yeah.
So, do you want to introduce yourself? Let us know who you are and why it's exciting to talk to you, and then Dan can tell us why it's actually exciting to talk to you.
Well, right now I'm the one who's excited to talk to you guys, but my name is Gal. I'm doing JavaScript security for the past 10 years, I think. Started off doing that in 8200, which is the cybersecurity unit of the Israeli IDF. I am kind of in love with JavaScript security, so I found myself doing that in startups that I worked for afterwards. And I've been doing that for a while, and I'm doing JavaScript security in MetaMask today as well. So that's pretty much about me.
MetaMask is a company, right?
Yeah, so MetaMask is a famous crypto wallet that belongs to a bigger company called Consensus. And lately they have a really cool initiative called Lava Mode, and Lava Mode is a project that tries to improve JavaScript security in terms of supply chain. So my project was kind of an interesting fit there. We're going to talk about it, I assume.
Yeah, that's the plan.
Yeah, for sure. So the word security and the other term supply chain security have come up a lot during your introduction. So maybe you'll tell us a little bit about what they are and what they mean in general and to you in particular.
Yeah, so I guess supply chain is a term that has been discussed a lot in the past few years, but I think that we have this massive problem where in the past years we're building web applications on top of supply chain and different dependencies that we're relying on, and that could be kind of a big mess because it's really hard to understand what is going on within those dependencies, and they rely on different dependencies, and you end up building your web application, for example, out of 97% code that you don't really know and understand, and potentially it could be malicious and it could find itself executing within your web application. So to me, that is supply chain security, trying to identify that problem and find a way to protect against it.
Are you referring mostly to stuff that we install via, let's say, NPM, or to just script tags that we, embed inside our web application to load third-party scripts, or both? What are you focusing on?
Well, I think it really depends on the angle that you're coming from, but the security technology that I usually find myself working on is from within the browser. So the answer to that would be all types of them, because to me, it's less about how malicious code found itself executing within any web application. It could be through npm install, it could be through a third-party script tag. My mission is to understand how I can protect the application in runtime against malicious entities, regardless of how they ended up running within my application.
So one of the guests we've had on here before was Faraz Abukadij, and talked about his company Socket, and their attempts to help make npm and dependencies and stuff safer and with security issues and stuff. I'm curious to see how, one, if you're familiar with that, I'm assuming you might be, and two, if you are, what's the difference between what you're doing and what Socket is doing?
Yeah, I'm familiar with them in general, but maybe not enough. I'm pretty sure that their solution is not executing within the browser in runtime. My angle is usually about running from like within the application in runtime and identifying like sketchy things that might happen and then try to understand what I can do about them. That is an angle that I did before working in MetaMask, and in MetaMask we're taking it to the next level in a lot of ways. But like I think that's the main difference between the approaches. Supply chain security is such a big problem that you have so many different projects and initiatives and like different projects and angles trying to approach this problem.
By the way, just to mention that we also had Liran Tal on our show from Sneak, and they are also their businesses are all about supply chain security. So it's worthwhile to listening to that show as well. So if I'm understanding correctly what you're saying, then you're saying that these types of solutions, Socket and Sneak, they kind of focus on preventing your avoiding bringing in the malicious stuff to begin with. You're kind of focusing on the assumption that whatever I do, some malicious stuff may find its way in, and so I've got to try to mitigate that at runtime. Am I understanding this correctly?
Yes, that is exactly it. It's about trying to claim that it would be pretty hard to identify those breaches when they happen, and assume that maybe we'll miss some of them and try to defend the application in runtime instead of in the build process.
So I looked at your project Snow, which I think is what we're primarily going to be talking about, right?
Yeah.
So my understanding from that was you load it before you load any other JavaScript, and you load it as a plain old script tag so that it doesn't get screwed up by any of the bundlers or malicious software that might be tampering with the build system, and that it neuters the global object so that the let's use the term middleware, perhaps the middleware that you want to protect runs in place of the default. So the fetch that's provided is going to be your middleware fetch rather than the raw fetch, and you can remove things from the global object. Did I get the right sense of it?
You that's the sense of it. I mean, I guess fetch is a problematic example only because fetch is not part of what I'm trying to defend. But as an example, yes, that is the essence of it. The idea with Snow is to act as a JavaScript shim, and part of it is to hook and monkey patch different APIs within the browser in order to be able to allow Snow's logic to apply within the execution.
So why not fetch? Is that because we already have the content security policy that can whitelist?
So the reason Snow doesn't treat fetch is because fetch is not one of the problems that Snow has to deal with. So just to put things in context, Snow's job is to make sure that any new realm that comes to life within the application goes through Snow. And that is because realms are actually kind of security hazard in terms of supply chain, and that is something that we can also try to explain.
Yeah, what's a realm?
Okay, yeah, that's a good.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
All right, yeah, great question.
I read fantasy novels. I know what that means there.
So the context here is a little bit different than that, but a realm is basically the execution environment and the set of APIs and the global object that you receive when you create a new execution environment. So for example, just to make it more clear, when I go on facebook.com, then Facebook runs within an entire realm called top. So the top window is a representation of that realm. And then within Facebook, for example, I can create new iframes. So iframes have their own realm. They have their own execution environment. They have their own global object. meaning their own window, and they have their own set of APIs, which are different than the set of APIs of the top window.
If I can, so if I am trying to think about it, basically, if it seems to me that what you're saying is that the realm is defined as all the objects that I can get to via the global object, which I can always access.
Yeah, that's
like the global scope. The root object, like, if I'm thinking about it from the perspective of, let's say, garbage collection, then you have kind of a root starting object that through it can get to all sorts of things. And as long as you can get at something, it needs to continue to exist. It can be collected once you can't get to it. So the realm kind of is defined by everything that you can get to by getting to the global object. I think it's now defined to be called something like global this, but most people who are using the browser are familiar with it as basically as the window object or something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly
from
right. Sorry.
No, so from the window I can get, like you said, I can do window.top or window.document and all the various globals. I know that JavaScript has some globals that don't exactly live on the window. They live kind of somewhere else, but they're also kind of global. So effectively everything that's global and everything that you can get to via global.
Yeah.
Now, it seems to me that what you're suggesting is kind of, well, challenging, because the same thing that you said, that you work by monkey patching, that's possible because JavaScript is so amicable to monkey patching. It was intentionally designed this way. I mean, I think Brendan Eich realized, when he created JavaScript, kind of realized that he's not going to be able to create this as a fully functional, completely spec'd and designed and implemented environment within the 10 days that he had. So he intentionally made it very monkey patchable so that it could be extended over time. And that's what enables polyfills and stuff like that, everything that makes JavaScript be able to be backward, forward compatible and so forth. But that I understand from what you've said so far is also kind of what you leverage to create a secure realm. But at the same time, it seems to me that kind of gets in the way of creating a secure realm, since I can, effectively monkey patch everything. Like, I don't know, inject something into the prototype, or I don't know, whatever. But again, maybe I'm kind of jumping the gun, and let's get back to what you were explaining about realms.
Oh yeah, no, I think that's a great point. I think that's actually a big part of the challenge in creating Snow. I mean, so Snow's job is to allow you to register a callback, and Snow's job is to call that callback with every new realm that comes to life within the application before the creator of that realm has access to it. So that means if any piece of code creates an iframe, for example, that Snow's job is to identify that and synchronously provide that new iframes window to the register of the Snow callback before providing that window on to the creator of that window. And achieving that is really complicated because of all the stuff you said. I need to make sure that I hook every possible way of creating an iframe. I need to make sure that I can do so synchronously, which is very complicated. And I need to make sure that every API that I use to accomplish that cannot be monkey patched by a different entity that executes afterwards. And that is really challenging, but so far seems to be possible.
So what? You're not actually blocking things. You're creating a callback that allows me to know and then do what?
Yeah, so that's the point about Snow. Snow's job is not to apply its own security logic. The idea is to allow you to create your own security logic, your own security tool that you expect to run in a web page, and use Snow to apply your logic not only to the top main frame, but automatically to all the different realms that might come up in the application. So, for example, let's say I have a security tool that simply blocks the access to local storage, for scripts that are third-party scripts, just because I want to protect it in a certain way. Obviously, I can think of more complicated logic to implement, but let's stick to that for now. So I can use Snow to automatically apply that protection to all new realms that any piece of code might create within the application. And that is important because if, as an attacker, I want to gain access to local storage, even though your security tool, I can do so by just creating a new iframe and then accessing the local storage from within that iframe, because your security mechanism is only applied to the top main realm. Snow allows you to take your security mechanism and automatically apply it to all new realms. And that is done by providing it with the callback.
When you talk about iframes, are you talking about mostly about same origin iframe, different origin iframes, both? What's the focus here? Because, iframes behave very differently if they're coming from the same origin or from a different origin.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. That's a big part of the project. So Snow's job is only around same origin realms, because the idea is that same origin realms are dangerous in the sense that anyone can just create new same origin frames and then use their APIs to bypass any security mechanism that apply to the top main frame. But if you have a cross origin frame, then an attacker wouldn't be able to leverage it synchronously because you don't have access to cross-origin frames. That would be a security breach. So in the same sense, Snow only tries to protect same origin frames, and Snow has an advanced technique to understand whether the iframe that is just catched is same origin and should be applied with the protection, or cross-origin and should be left alone.
So basically what you're saying is that if it's a cross-origin iframe, then the cross-origin security policies that browsers have in place are effectively good enough from your perspective. Going back to your local storage example, they can read and write to the local storage, but they can't read and write to your local storage. So they can, put whatever junk they want in their own local storage. You don't care about that. You want to prevent like somebody creating an iframe in order to get. So going again back to your local storage example. Let's say I'm putting stuff. I want to put stuff which might. Which I kind of want to keep private in local storage. We can debate whether it's a good idea or not.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say I'm doing that. And in order to prevent third-party code from getting at it, what you're saying, I'm overriding the local storage. I'm replacing it with my own shim, which let's say gets an extra parameter, which is some sort of a security key or whatever. And without that security key, you can't read or write from that local storage or something like that. And what you're saying is that if I want to make sure that somebody doesn't create an iframe with the same origin, and within that iframe the local storage is not replaced because it lives on the window of that iframe, not on the main window, which, like I said, I patched. So I want to catch that and do what? What do you see people usually doing?
So that was exactly right. The idea is to do just that and apply the security mechanism that you just described for local storage. So you just described a mechanism that needs to get a key, and only with that key you can have access. So I want to use Snow to automatically apply that to the iframes realm as well. So basically automatically monkey patch that security mechanism with the local storage key to the window of the iframe as well. And then, does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about whether it's possible to monkey patch of a service like local storage in a way that makes it quote unquote secure to begin with, because it feels almost to the extent that whatever data gets to the client side, I can't rely on it being like secure almost.
So it doesn't have to be local storage access. It could be any type of an example. So for example, one thing that we're trying to do in Lava Mode, which is a whole new project, but we're trying to actually make realms unusable. So the idea is to use Snow to catch every new iframe that might be created in the web app, and then basically delete it or delete its properties or make its properties, like its global objects properties, unusable by deleting them or redefining them, because we have the ability to protect the top main realm with the Lava Mode's different techniques, which are basically out of scope here. But defending those realms and preventing an attacker from using the APIs of those realms is a different task, and we don't want anyone to create realms with our web application because there is no need to that. So we can use Snow to just eliminate them basically, and that's just one example. You can use Snow to basically just shape how you want the realms to look like, and if you want to apply certain monkey patches or different APIs to your top main realm, and you want every new realm to look the same, then you can use Snow to accomplish that.
Yeah, I'm still trying to wrap my head around some of this. So first of all, just kind of back up a little bit. So if I create an iframe with the same domain origin that I have for my primary website or my main realm, I mean, how does that usually lead to some kind of compromise on the front end? Because I have to admit, I don't use iframes at all. It's just not, I probably have some plugins on my website that do, I think, discuss the comment section right on Top End Devs. It does that kind of thing, but it's a cross domain thing, right? And so we're not even talking about that. But for my own development, I just don't use them, and so I'm trying to figure out where the security vulnerability is. Right? It sounds like those realms have access to the same, like you said, to the local storage. Probably have access to the session data and things like that on the
Cookies.
on the cookies, right? All that stuff could make API calls to the back end and be authenticated through the cookie session, whatever. And so I understand how that is compromised, but if it's the same domain iframe, is there some way for people to inject their own JavaScript into there, or how are people compromising that realm?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to understand the context of this security aspect. So what we're trying to defend here is the application from malicious code being executed there. Now, let's back it up before Snow. You have today different security tools. I know Perimeter X are developing such security tools, and you have Akamai, and you also have Lava Mode, which we're working on. And those different security tools are basically saying, so my application might execute malicious code, and it might use network access and storage access and DOM access to steal information from the web application. And I want to understand if I can stop them. So I can implement different security mechanism with those tools to protect access to storage, to protect access to network, to monitor anything that goes to the network. And those security tools, they exist and they do different stuff, and they're trying to protect that aspect. Now, what I'm trying to accomplish with Snow is basically tell those security tools, hey, your security mechanism is an important mission to accomplish. But if you're trying to protect different APIs by monkey patching them, but you're not doing that automatically to iframes. That means that an attacker can ignore your security mechanism and ignore your monkey patches that are trying to protect the web application by
Okay.
simply going through the iframe instead of the top main realm. Allows Snow to automatically apply your security mechanism to all the different realms, so an attacker wouldn't be able to create an iframe and bypass your mechanism.
Chuck, I'll give you an example. I think it kind of relates to an example that you, Gal, gave in one of your posts that you wrote about this. Think about it this way. Let's say I have an iframe, a same domain iframe, and once it's a same domain iframe, you know, you don't need post message to communicate between the containing window and the iframe. You can just call functions back and forth and pass objects directly between them, because they're all executing in the same, you know, quote unquote thread. And let's say I create an array within the iframe and I pass that, or within, let's say, the global window, and pass it into the iframe, into a function within the iframe. And within that iframe, I use isArray to test whether this is an array or not. Do you know what it will say? IsArray will actually say that it is, I think. But if you look, if you use it to compare via prototype, it will say that it isn't. An array within the iframe and an array out from outside the iframe would have different array prototypes.
Okay.
So if you try to prevent certain operations being performed on an array by modifying the array prototype, that would take effect in the, let's say, your main window. But if malicious code running within your main window created an iframe behind your back, passed an array into that iframe, copied data, let's say, into an array created within that iframe, those protections that you put in place would not be there.
Yeah.
I'm kind of struggling to think about what protections I can actually put, but I gather that's not really your problem, Gal. You're just there to prevent people creating these types of malicious iframes, or at the very least to know that some code created such a malicious iframe, trying to you know, maybe you, like you said, maybe you close it, maybe you neuter it, maybe you do something else with it, but that's kind of not your problem, if I understand correctly.
Well, technically, yes, it is. It is not my problem. It is not. It is out of Snow's scope, but it is definitely my problem in the sense of, if there isn't any use for that, then there isn't any use for Snow, and then I'm working for nothing. So hopefully people will find it useful. But to try to explain better, a little bit more what Dan just said, Dan was referring to identity discontinuity. So I think the best example is, for example, if I create a new anchor element, and then, so you know, you have instance of, so you can ask if that new anchor element is an instance of the HTML anchor element prototype, and the answer would be yes. But if you try to compare that anchor element to the prototype of the anchor element that comes from an iframe, then the answer would be no. That is because it is not an instance of the anchor prototype of the top main frame. It is an instance of the anchor element of an iframe, and that is not the same thing. And that is basically identity discontinuity. So Snow's job is basically to make sure that if there is a security mechanism that you want to implement, no matter what it is, and there are actual examples today. So there are, for example, companies who are trying to monkey patch network requests, and instead of using CSP to try to identify specific bits of the request or specific bits of the post message, and try to understand if there's anything there that should be blocked or not. And they accomplish that by monkey patching the top main frame. But as I said before, that is basically useless if you don't monkey patch those network APIs within the iframe as well.
Can I ask one quick question here? We've been throwing around the term monkey patch. Has anybody defined it?
Yeah, so monkey patching is the ability, as Dan said before, in JavaScript, you have the ability to override the behavior of functions. So, for example, we have the alert function that comes from the window object. So I can override alert to, instead of popping an alert message, to become a new function that console logs the content of the message instead of like popping the alert. So that's like an example for monkey patching.
But the point is that you're doing it at runtime as compared to say compile time, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the same mechanism that enables polyfills. So you can in JavaScript. I kind of refer to JavaScript as being the most dynamic of all dynamic languages, and the browser environment to be like a reflection of that. So, for example, you can take any existing JavaScript object and add properties to it, remove properties from it, replace properties. You can go to the prototype of the object, and this way you can modify like a whole class of objects, and as we know, polyfills kind of depend on that. Also, you can go to the global object and add stuff there. It's the JavaScript itself and the browser environment in general is very malleable. By the way, I recently learned something interesting, that Dino intentionally prevents certain modifications to the prototype chain. Like I think they block the underscore proto _ property on objects, and so that people don't intentionally abuse it. They see it as an attack vector, so they kind of decided to block it, which is really interesting. But like I said, Brendan, I kind of intentionally made JavaScript very malleable, and that introduces certain security issues. Although again, you might argue that the client side is such a vulnerable environment in any event, that any really important data that needs to be kept secure just needs to be kept on the server side, and that's it.
Yeah, I also think that you can look at Snow not only as a security, like not only in the security aspect, but the idea is that you have the ability with Snow to shape all the new same origin realms in the page the way you want it. So, for example, let's look at it in a monitoring perspective rather than security. I do know that there are different monitoring tools that are trying to monitor different errors or different network calls or stuff like that. And today, they cannot do so for same origin realms. Now, there are web applications that create same origin realms and they have actual activity in there, but there is no possible way for those monitoring tools to monitor the activity within those realms as well, because they don't have Snow. So if I want to monitor with my monitoring tool network calls and exceptions that might be thrown, I can do so within all same origin realms automatically using Snow. So that's also an example that is not security oriented to how Snow is useful.
Now, you said that the way to embed Snow within my website is basically put in a synchronous script tag at the very top of the HTML. It kind of blocks everything until it downloads. When it downloads, it runs. And then you kind of, like you said, you patch all the ways in which an iframe can be created. Are there ways to create same origin realms other than iframes, by the way?
Yes, so you can achieve same origin realms via embed object, embed element, object element. There is also the deprecated frame element that still works and accomplishes the same thing. You can achieve a same realm origin by using the open API. So you have window.open that creates a new tab. And if that tab is same origin, then you have synchronous access to it. And there are just so many other examples. I also have to be able to patch the different ways, whether I use programmatic JavaScript to insert new realms, aka create element and then append to body, but I also have to make sure I can do so for inner HTML, because you can introduce the same origin realms via iframes within inner HTML calls, which just goes to show how complicated this project is.
And it's an open source project, from what I understand. It's not a product provided by the company that you work at, or is it?
So right now it's a open source project licensed as MIT. Lava Mode, by the way, is the same story so far. We're trying to show that there are important security aspects that should be treated. And we invite anyone to have a look, to build on top, and to just use it, basically.
So how is Lava Mode different from Snow? What does it provide?
So Lava Mode is kind of a whole different project, but the idea there is to... so Lava Mode is a tool that allows you to build your web application using Lava Mode, and Lava Mode has its own policy that basically says which dependency can access what APIs in the web app. So for example, if I have a web application that runs on top of a dependency that creates network access using fetch, so Lava Mode would have within its policy a directive that says this dependency can only access the fetch API, and then it builds itself with a protection mechanism that uses this policy to enforce it in execution in runtime. So why is that actually useful? Because if that certain dependency gets breached by a third-party entity that tries to implement access to, I don't know, cookies, for example, then the access would be blocked in real time, just because the policy, the Lava Mode policy in real time, doesn't reflect access to document.cookie. It only reflects access to network API. So that's what Lava Mode does, and it's a really interesting project as well, if that makes sense.
So I wanted to ask about, well, if anybody else had anything to say about Lava Mode, but I wanted to ask about diminishing returns and where the focus of security is best spent, because there's a million things that can do. It gets really confusing. One of the terrible things is that people are told, oh, security is too hard, don't learn it. And not everything that can be done should be done, because there are some things like putting a deadbolt on your front and back door are going to eliminate 99% of threats if you use the deadbolt correctly, right? Then there's barring up your windows is going to reduce another 0.1% of threats. And then putting steel plates around your house is going to reduce another 0.00001%. Putting up a fence around your house might give you a 10% advantage, right? So when you're looking at our web application and where the security needs to be, what are your thoughts on where are you getting the 90% with the least amount of custom configuration or highly specific application knowledge? And then what works towards the diminishing returns of, you know, at some point you're doing something that's highly specific that doesn't really provide a lot of protection.
So I don't know if I see it that way. I think that security is important when it comes to technology. Security is important in most aspects. I think what Snyk is doing and the companies that are trying to secure against supply chain attack in build time is really important. But I think it was proven over and over that even though we have tools like Snyk and tools that work in a build time, there are still ways to breach the supply chain. And also you might find web application execute malicious code that were not introduced as part of the supply chain. So for example, third-party script tags can also be breached. And you don't have a way to control that because it's not part of your supply chain. It's just embedded within your web application. not to mention XSS attacks, which are less common today, but are also potentially a problem. So I think runtime protection is important. I think there are multiple companies that are trying to solve that issue by creating advanced security tools. And I'm just trying to bring Snow to help those security tools to be complete. Because if you don't use your security mechanism on all potential realms, you might find yourself just as vulnerable as not running your security mechanism at all. That's how I see it.
I have to concur with that, because I don't think the concept of the diminishing return in the analogy that you used, AJ, kind of fits here. Because when you're looking at the effort about breaking into a house, it's not the same as as the concept of breaking, hacking into systems. Whenever when a 0 day comes along, it becomes so immensely valuable and profitable that and everybody will gain access to that sooner or later because of the way in which hacking tools are propagated. So I see it that the way that is that even if you leave like a 1% entry point into your system, once people are once that 1% is identified, it's as if you have no protection at all. So I don't totally agree with the concept of diminishing returns here.
Well, so for example, if you don't include third-party scripts on the page through sources that you can't audit, right? You could eliminate, you make things part of your supply chain. So when you say third-party scripts, I think of things like Stripe, right? Which Stripe is one of the few that I think are reasonable to trust, but there's no reason that you should be loading Stripe from Stripe's domain, the JavaScript for it, right? You could download that and you could load it from your own domain, and then you could eliminate Stripe as something that has third-party risk, because you could say, well, all the functionality of what Stripe needs to do is contained in this JavaScript file. If we host this JavaScript file from our own server, then we have eliminated the ability for Stripe to be compromised and for it to send us malicious code, which I think Stripe is an unlikely example in this case. But if you've got some sort of stupid widget that, I don't know, automates dark mode or something, you could have these widgets that are third-party scripts that if you just host them yourself, so that you're not, or put them in your CDN, actually pay for a CDN that's a real CDN, not one of these fake buzzword type CDNs, but pay for a real CDN if you need it, or just host it off your server. Bring those third-party dependencies, just download them. You don't just download them. Then you've eliminated third-party scripts being modified without your being aware. That way, when you push to prod, that's the only time those scripts get modified, unless the CDN becomes vulnerable, right? So there are things you can do that eliminate 99% of the risk.
I think effectively there's a reason why that's not the case for forever, basically, because even though we understand the implications, we still see web applications being built that way for multiple reasons. One of them is that a third-party script sometimes answers a certain service that you need in your web application, and you want
to just download it.
No, but like you want the provider to be able to update it without your.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing. I think that most third-party script providers don't really want you to be downloading their script and running their script off of your own CDN or domain or whatever, because they want to be able to update that script. So if we're looking at the majority of third-party scripts that come in not via NPM, but via script tags or stuff like that, we're talking about various pixels and marketing pixels and stuff like that.
So that's the vulnerability, right?
Okay, I want to pump the brakes here just for a second, because it feels like this is a huge tangent off of what we're actually talking about, in the sense that, in the broader discussion of supply chain vulnerabilities, I mean, some of these things matter, and speaking to specific strategies makes sense. But what we're talking about here with Gal is, what hit this specific approach and this specific opening that's caused by creating a realm through an iframe or something similar. And all of your other security tools, like the things that would do the audits during the build or do the audits in runtime or things like that, those are all things that we can pull in and make sense for attacking supply chain vulnerabilities. But I'd like to go as deep as we can on this particular area of vulnerability and make sure that our listeners understand it and understand how to mitigate it, rather than going into, okay, you should have all these other things in place, because I feel like we've covered those on other episodes.
Okay, but my question is, you can't just say, oh no, this is just as important as everything else. That's a cop-out. You got to give me some sense of scale of, if you're to prioritize where does this fit in, it's got to have some sort of priority. Not everything is priority one.
I agree with you, but my point with this is this applies it's really distracting, the delay in the video here. My point is if we're looking at this and we're thinking about, okay, how do we bring this stuff in? What we're saying is this closes the door if you have the other pieces in place so that they can't be exploited across the other parts of your application. And so, yeah, this may not be the top priority, but once you have these other pieces in place, you're closing the door to this particular type of end run around your security.
I would add to that, or I would phrase it as following. If you have a system in place that supposedly adds a layer of protection at runtime, unless that system also addresses the issue of additional realms in the same domain, then it's done nothing. So basically the point is, either you're not using such a solution at all because you're relying on whatever tests you're doing at build time, but if you have decided to also address supply chain security at runtime, then you have to factor in realms, because that otherwise they'll be exploited. That's, I think, is the the gist of the thing. Correct me if I'm wrong, Gal.
Yeah, I agree completely.
So one thing that I do want to add in here, because this also goes to the idea of when and how to implement this, is that sometimes there's a bit of a setup process, right? There's a real cost in time or effort to putting something like Snow in. And sometimes it's relatively simple. Can you just walk us through that process so we can also evaluate not just, okay, somebody might write their script such that it tries it on the main realm, and then it tries to create its own realm, to see if you've plugged that hole. How much work is it to put this in so that they can't use the realm, or they can't create their own realm and end run you?
Yeah, so for example, if I want to eliminate access to realms completely using Snow, are you referring to the implementation of Snow or the usage of Snow?
Usage. Like, how do I stick this on my page and know that it's, to the extent that it's effective? And I'm assuming you've got most of the use cases, if not all of them, that are currently known covered. What do I have to do to get that in my app?
Yeah, so if you're the creator of the app, then what you'd have to do is to, as Dan said before, have like the script tag that brings Snow in synchronously. And then in another script tag, you can just call the new callback that's set to window called Snow, and you pass Snow a callback, and that callback will be provided with every new window that comes to life. So that is how you implement Snow. If you're a third-party service that is creating security tools and wants to enhance your security mechanism using Snow, then you can also include Snow as a dependency and then serve your mechanism, your security tool, with Snow within it, and consume it just the same. And if you want to use Snow, then all you have to do is just call the callback and provide it with a callback that will shape the new windows the way you want it. So for example, if I want to use Snow to eliminate all new realms because my web application should not allow realms, I can do so by getting that window, accessing its frame element, and detaching it from the window, for example. But usually the best case for using Snow would not be by the web application. I expect the third-party security vendors to use Snow to apply their mechanism automatically to the realms using Snow.
So the other question that this brings up for me then is, let's say that I put Snow on my page, right? And then I pull in some security feature or function that also includes Snow. Then I pull in a third one that also includes Snow. Like, how does that stack up? Do I wind up with 3 instances of Snow? Or does it sort of merge the configs from all of them? Or how does it figure that out?
So being a shim, you can't really have multiple Snows in your page because they eventually apply different monkey patches, as we mentioned before, and
Okay.
it makes sure they are non-configurable due to security reasons. So if you have another instance of Snow, you'll see a clash. But making sure that there's only one instance of Snow in your self-maintained application should be possible.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just still kind of wrapping my head around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I include, let's say Sneak includes one, right? And they give me a script to put on my page or put into my build process. And then I want to use it as well. Yeah, I guess that's my concern is, do I have to kind of deduplicate it somehow? Or
So if 2 different vendors want to use Snow, so one thing that could be done is to, eventually you have access to the callback and you can provide it with a callback. You can call that function multiple times. You can provide it with multiple callbacks, and then Snow would pass the new
Okay.
window to the chain of callbacks.
By the way, how
Okay.
big is Snow?
That's a good question. I'm not even sure, but it's pretty small. I can check that real quick also.
And like you said, it's an open source project. Are you working on this alone? Are there other contributors? I get one of the things that, answer that before where I bring up the next point.
Yeah, so currently I work on Snow almost all by myself. I have a couple of coworkers from MetaMask and Lava Mode project who help me with different parts of the project. I also managed to get other security experts interested in the project, and they suggested ways to bypass Snow, which was excellent. It just showed how complicated the problem is to solve. And a big part of the job was also to address those issues and make sure that I can patch them and that Snow can address those issues and remain as secure as possible. But right now, I work on Snow almost only by myself.
Are you looking for additional people to work with you on the project?
Yeah, I would love any help. I'm looking for help. I'm mainly looking for adoption. And anyone who's just interested in the initiative and wants to pitch in any way.
By the way, we kind of
So-
mentioned it during our discussion at the beginning of the show, or I think we also talked about it, you and I, before the show, that you kind of achieved something of the holy grail of the open source maintainers, that you're
Right.
that you're effectively being paid to work on your open source project. Is that correct?
Well, to a certain extent, we came up with a small agreement on when I joined MetaMask and brought Snow with me, because Snow was a project that I started off before MetaMask. So coming along, working on Lava Mode and bringing Snow with me was part of that. Yeah.
So basically, you said if you want me, you got to also take my project along with me, or something along those lines.
To a certain extent, I think the tone was more about I love what you do in Lava Mode. I think that's a really interesting initiative, and I think that if you're looking to secure the supply chain for other people and for MetaMask as well, I think that Snow is a really interesting way to do that in just like a different layer. And we already found useful example of how Snow is implemented with Lava Mode and helps Lava Mode ship its security mechanism to all different realms within the application. So it's really cool to see how those things combine.
I think I just heard that it's story time. Is there somebody out there using Snow or Lava Mode or both that had some kind of measurable or noticeable effect?
That's a good question. I'm mostly on the research and development part at this point. I do know that, well, MetaMask, it is built within MetaMask, so that's easier to implement. But MetaMask eventually is a really big project with like, I think 30 something million users, and both Lava Mode and Snow protect MetaMask at this point. So it's really hard to measure any attacks because we're not really reporting those attacks. We just make sure that they're not possible to begin with. But we do know that once in a while you hear of different dependencies that were breached and somehow managed to access different web applications. I think it never happened to MetaMask, but they were already so into creating such a security tool just out of fear of being a company that might be exposed to that.
Cool. Well, we've been going for about an hour. Are there any other points that we need to bring up before we start moving toward self-promo and picks?
Yeah, I think another point is that, well, I guess no, I think that's pretty much it. That was about Snow. I think it's a cool project, and I would love to see people either use it or maybe help out with it, or at least showing some interest. I find it really interesting how difficult it is to push this forward, but I love how that's part of the journey. So it's pretty fun.
I would like to make a point about how coding relies on animals. For instance, we talked about monkey patching. And if you think about rubber ducking, and I've heard the term duck punching, which to me seems rather violent. So I think it's important that we recognize coding's dependence on animals for illustrations.
Camel casing?
Camel casing, thank you very much.
Duck typing.
Yep. The duck seems to take the most abuse and praise as well. So it's sort of a two-edged sword, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and then anyway. Gal, if people want to connect with you either to volunteer to help or because they have questions or they want to see where this could take them with the stuff they're working on, what's the best way to connect with you?
Well, I am as reachable as possible, and I'm making sure to look out for messages, but Twitter is a good place at Weizman Gal, GitHub on Weizman. Yeah, those
You're
two
not
are
on Mastodon yet?
That's a really good question. I am avoiding
There's another animal. That one's extinct.
Yeah. I might have to transfer there at some point. I'm just trying to deny the whole situation, but like might not be able to do it for long.
No, you got to get Twitter Blue. You got to support free speech.
I'm basically straddling both worlds. I'm using this tool that anything that I tweet gets tooted, and I've not yet gone the other way around, but I might do it as well. But that way, it's just that I need to look at two places instead of one. But other than that, it's okay. I can live with that. By the way, how do people find the actual project, both Snow and Lava Mode?
Yeah, so they're both under the organization Lava Mode. So if you go on github.com/Lava Mode, you'll find all of them. I think
how do
Lava
you spell
Mode,
that, by the way?
Lava Mode. So you spell it Lava, Lava, and then Mode would be MOAT. So just combine them and you get Lava Mode. And when you go on the organization on GitHub, you get, I think the two pinned projects are Lava Mode and Snow. So you'll find both of them.
Now, how does that work where you have lava and snow working against each other? Does lava
that's
snow or vice versa?
Excellent question. When we published one of the articles talking about how I think it's really important to implement Snow within Lava Mode, so we actually used Dolly to come up with a cool picture that combines Snow and lava and also a fox, because MetaMask's logo is a fox. And after a couple of tries, it actually turned out pretty cool with like a fox watching like a volcano with lava, and it's like a snowy view, and it turned out pretty cool. So good work.
So we added a section a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, where people get to self-promote. They get to talk about the stuff that they're working on, and then we do our picks, which is the normal thing. AJ, do you want to start us off with the self-promo? What are you working on?
What am I working on? I don't know right now.
Okay. That there are those weeks. All right. How about you, Dan? Anything you're working on you want to let people know about?
Well, I'm a working stiff, so most of the work that I do is just working for the man. Doing the day to day. Part of my picks will be the conference that I recently spoke at, and maybe mention some of the conferences that I'm about to speak at. So these are the things that I do kind of outside my normal day to day. My normal day to day is mostly focusing about performance both on the front end and on the back end at Next Insurance, the company that I'm working at. It's interesting because we use a variety of frameworks and a variety of services and platforms. So, working across all of these and both on the front end and the back end can be really challenging. And yeah, those are the things that I'm currently working on.
All right, good deal. How about you, Steve?
I guess the closest thing I can think of from a public standpoint is a couple of episodes we've done on Views on View, or other podcasts lately, where I talked to Adam Jar from View Mastery.
Cool.
And the impetus was a course that I did for View Mastery, shameless plug, called Nux 3 Essentials. And we just talked about View Mastery and how they do their stuff, how they make their magic, because their videos are pretty different than most any other course that's out there. And then another one I did with one of my favorite guests, Debbie O'Brien, from the Nux community, and a new testing tool she has called Playwright. It's an end-to-end type tool.
Playwright's
like
famous.
Cypress. Yeah, it's really pretty sweet if you look at it and all the things that it can do. Some of the stuff it spins up for you just right out of the box. Generate some test stubs and things like that. So yeah, those are some pretty cool episodes. I like those. So you can check out Views on View for those.
I think we said that we should bring you on the show once, sometime in the future, not as a host, but as a guest representing View and the View community.
Yeah, I don't know how much I can represent the community as a whole, but yeah, I could certainly talk about what I know and see. So
yeah, that'd be awesome. I'm going to throw up a few things that I'm working on. One of the things that I've been working on lately is just getting basically an RSS subscription via email through ActiveCampaign. So watch for an email form to show up on the website where you can go and you can get emailed when we put out a new episode. The other thing that I'm working on, and this is a new podcast, is called Catapult Your Coding Career. I have people ask me questions all the time about how to learn new things or figure out what's going on in the community, or how to get unstuck, how to work with their boss, how to get a raise. And so I'm just going to answer those questions. It's not going to be as long form as this, where we're talking for an hour or so. I'm aiming for about 10, maybe 15 minutes at the outside. Probably going to do it multiple times a week. And yeah, just talk through those things. If you want a longer session with me, you can pick up a half-hour session with me. Just go to topenddevs.com/coaching. You do have to apply to one of the 2 coaching programs, but from there, we'll work that out. If you want to just slide a question in and you don't want to go the full coaching route, Top End Devs membership, we try and make sure we have 1 or 2 Q&A calls every month. And so you can submit your questions ahead of time, and then we'll make sure that we're, talking through that stuff. So, yeah, I mean, no guarantees on that one, right? If you're doing coaching, either group coaching or one-on-one coaching, you'll get your questions answered every time. If you get on that, then it just kind of depends on who's submitting questions and how many we get. But I'll try and get to as many people as I can. Right now, those calls tend to be pretty open, just because the membership is new. But I don't anticipate that it will always be that way. So anyway, Gal, do you have anything else you're working on that you want to promote?
Well,
let people know about?
Yeah. So this is a project that I'm less working on at the moment because I had to focus on Snow basically. But there is a really cool technology that is built on top of Snow that I created. I call it a cross. And to keep it short, a cross allows two scripts within the same web application to exchange messages and communication safely while knowing that the message that script A got from script B really came from script B. And that's something that is not possible to accomplish as of today. It's an experimental project. It's pretty cool. And achieving that without Snow is impossible because creating new realms and getting APIs from within it can assist an attacker to bypass a cross. So that's a really cool project that I love, but right now it's experimental and I'm not working on it just as much. But if anyone's interested, it's pretty cool and I would definitely check it out.
Very cool. All right, we're going to do some picks. Dan, you want to start us off with picks?
Sure, why not? So, as I kind of alluded at the beginning of the show, I was, if you haven't noticed, I've been away for a while. I haven't participated in the show for about a month. So if you were kind of wondering where I went to Australia. And so my first pick is going to be Australia because it was, just awesome. It's a place that I think everybody should visit at least once. It's not easy to get there. So if and when you do get there, it's certainly worthwhile spending some time. People don't just realize how big Australia is. I think it's bigger than Europe. It's almost as big as the US, I think. And it's there like ton of space because there are only like 30 million people living in it or something along these lines. And a lot of them are concentrated in like 2 or 3 big cities. So all the rest is kind of pretty empty. For example, there's the Northern Territory, and they say they have more crocodiles than people, and I wouldn't be surprised.
That seems natural.
It's funny, and one of the things that kind of surprised us, we live in Israel, and next to the Mediterranean, and we all like to go to the beach. And in Australia, in a lot of parts, you can't really. You can go to the beach, but you can't enter the water because you'll die. Because the sharks will get you, and if the sharks don't, then the crocodiles will. And what probably will kill you, though, is a tiny jellyfish that's really, really venomous. So yeah. But anyway, as I was saying, Australia is just beautiful and awesome. We visited several places there. We went to Tasmania, which was amazing. You drove along the Great Ocean Road, which was amazing, Grampians and the Great Barrier Reef and whatnot. We really tried to see as much as we could within the 1 month that we were there. And as I said, I highly recommend it. By the way, aside from the views being amazing, the people were great. They were just, super friendly people. It made life a lot easier for us that they all speak English, obviously. And they're just so nice, you just walk down the street and people will just say hello or good day, and they mean it. They don't just say it, and they, people just smile at you, and they're all so friendly and courteous and whatnot. So again, I highly recommend visiting there. By the way, they're kind of moving towards a cash-free society. There are places where you can't even pay with cash. You need to pay with a credit card, and it's to the extent that when you have panhandlers on the street, they get their money via an app or something like that.
Oh wow!
Yeah, you give them money from your phone, or like street artists as well. It's kind of funny that way. Anyway. So that would be my first pick. My second pick would be the reason that I originally went to Australia, which was the Web Direction Summit conference created and run by John Alsop. It was an amazing conference. It was a hybrid conference, which the unfortunate implication of that is that currently I don't think the talks are available to everybody. I don't know when they will be. Currently, they're only available to people who actually pay to watch them. But it was a great conference nonetheless. There were some like 6 tracks, a lot of talks, a lot of excellent content, a lot of great people, and I really enjoyed it a lot. It was in the beautiful city of Sydney. So that would be my second pick. If you get a chance to ever attend that conference or speak at that conference, I highly recommend it as well. And my third pick, when's the last time you've heard about the war in Ukraine? I'm betting that you haven't heard about it in a while. It probably nothing in the news. Unfortunately, that does not mean that it's over. In fact, it's going on as much as it previously did, and Russians are still bombing civilian infrastructure and population centers and whatnot, and it's pretty horrible. So that's the pick that I will continue picking, even though you're not hearing about it in the news anymore, because everybody's moved on to something else. And I usually say, anything that you can do to help the people there, please do. And those would be my picks for today.
So Dan, while you were in Sydney, did you, I know there's a lot of tourist attractions around and stuff. Did you go looking for that famous dentist office from Finding Nemo? Where they held him in the fish tank and then he escaped. I've heard that's a real famous tourist attraction there.
To be honest, I didn't even remember that Finding Nemo takes place there, although it's not surprising. So no, we did not look for that. But Sydney is pretty amazing. They have obviously the Opera House, which is really famous. But they also have like a couple of amazing beaches, Bondi Beach and Manly Beach. And they have an amazing botanical gardens, and the city itself is just lovely. It's not like the European cities where you go to see buildings from hundreds of years ago. It's more like the US in that regard. Everything, like the oldest buildings are 200 years old, which in Israel, by the way, basically means they were built yesterday. But still, it was really a lovely city, and lovely people. As I said, I enjoyed it a lot.
Nice. So Quora says that there's no way that office could be located the way that it is. Just so you know, Steve.
Oh.
In fact, why don't you give us your picks?
Okay, so I actually have an actual pick before I get to the high point of every episode. It's an interesting article from National Geographic, and a lot of us, I can speak for myself, and I've heard other people mention this, that as developers, a lot of times we're stuck on a problem and we'll go away, and some people will purposely take walks, or a lot of times you'll come up with ideas or fixes or something when you're doing something like taking a shower. And so there's an interesting article on National Geographic called The Science of Why You Have Great Ideas in the Shower. And it talks about some recent research been on this. And the gist of it is that the idea is that you're going to come up with ideas when your mind isn't really trying to think of something. It's sort of a default relaxed mode, and therefore your brain has the capability to wander and think about other things that you might not be thinking of when you're really trying to come up with a solution. So we'll put a link in the show notes, obviously, but sort of an interesting article. And it's one of those things that, sort of confirms what a lot of people have known and practiced for a while. It's just sort of a confirmation and an explanation as to why. Now for the highlight, the dad jokes of the week. So not too long ago, I entered the World Kleptomaniac Championships. I took gold, silver, and bronze. There we go. A little delay on the drum joke there. Sorry. My son, he likes to watch TV and stuff, and he randomly turns into a TV sometimes. So I got him admitted to the hospital. The doctors are currently watching him. And then finally, for the last few months, Christmas was, as of recording, is probably about 2-3 weeks ago. My wife had been leaving jewelry catalogs all over the house. I finally got the hint, and I got her a magazine rack for Christmas.
That was a good one. That must
Yeah, the
have
last
gone
one
over
was pretty
splendidly.
good. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyway, those are my picks.
All right, AJ, what are your picks?
So first of all is going to be the Ubiquity Dream Machine. So I've now set up 2 of these things. They're actually a little bit annoying to set up because you kind of have to reboot them on the first time because they ship with the version of software that's older than the version of the app. And so the first time setup as of today is annoying because they just switched between version 2 and version 3. But once it's set up, it's pretty amazing. Once you actually get logged in, it's pretty amazing. You can just plug in access points, Ubiquity access points, and they just boom, they just work. You click adopt and you set the network name or whatever, but it's very simple. You plug in security cameras and they just work. Again, you just click on adapt, and then there's just a couple of settings you can choose. Do I want it to record all the time, or only when there's motion detected, or only when there's persons detected, or whatever? But I think that Ubiquity is really doing a bang up job of providing higher quality products at lower prices that are pretty easy to set up and use once you got it updated out of the box to the latest version. And I set one up at my home as part of a security system. And then I found out about all the cool networking tools that it had, and I thought that was great. And then because we need to meet certain compliance guidelines, we're isolating our network at Savvy so that we're in a shared co-working space. So our office is just one building and it's an old building. So the way the networking is done, everything's just really hodgepodge. And so in order to give us some isolation from the network, we put one of those in, and it's great because now we have audit logs for what devices connect to the network and when and what websites they're visiting and all that, good stuff that is both helpful and checks boxes on if you have to deal with SOC 2 compliance and things like that. I'm also going to pick the Zoom H1N handy mic recorder because as far as I can tell, there's nothing out there that is as good as the Zoom H1N in terms of versatility. It can work as a podcast mic. It can work for recording. It's got auto leveling, meaning that the gain, if you're recording at a meetup or at a conference, maybe not a conference because that might be too big of a room, but if you're recording at a meetup and you're speaking and then you pause and somebody asks a question, it will pick up the person asking the question. Whereas everybody's watched a video where somebody in the back of the room asks a question and you can't hear what they asked, and then maybe the speaker forgets to repeat the question, and so you don't hear the question, you just hear the speaker answering. The Zoom H1N, it just, if you don't have a $10,000 sound setup, but you can afford $65, and that's kind of the 2 options. It's either you're going to go heavy into setup or you get a Zoom H1N. So I'm thrilled with it. Every time I look in to see if there's something better, there isn't. I just wish they would put USB-C on it so I quit having to carry around a USB micro cable. But I love it. And let's see. I think I had one other thing. Oh, I think I made mention of this before, but it finally arrived. There's this guy in Australia, speaking of Australia, who has taken these soldering irons that have become somewhat popular. They're called T12s because they're relatively cheap and you can get a variety of them, and they're actually really high quality. So they rival some of the other brands like, oh gosh, I'm forgetting the names, Hako, and they rival above that even. Anyway, this guy has created 3D printed fixtures with a little microcontroller. I think it's a Blue Pill, which is similar to the Raspberry Pi Zero. I think it's based on the Raspberry Pi Zero / Blue Pill architecture. So he's 3D printed these boards, put a circuit board in there, a knob, a screen, and a plug, and you can attach it to a DeWalt battery, to a rigid battery. You can pick the one for the battery system that you have for your power tools. and it will heat up the iron in about 6 seconds to 300 degrees Celsius. 6, maybe 7 seconds. It's fast. And it's got the software on the little chip has got all of the features of a professional $2,000 or $3,000 soldering station, where it does temperature detect. If the temperature's not changing, it goes for so long, it goes into standby mode. If the temperature does change, then it starts heating up again. And for those that don't know, the reason the temperature would change when it's sitting still is if you touch a soldering iron to metal, the metal will wick away the heat from the soldering iron, causing the temperature of the tip of the soldering iron to drop. And these tips have temperature sensors. Well, they use the combination of metal they use ends up acting as a temperature sensor. And so they're able to, anyway, it's just, you're getting a $2,000 soldering iron for $100 that is portable and heats up in 6 seconds to full working temperature. It's unbelievable. So I got one now. It's awesome.
Cool. Let me throw in a few picks of my own. The first one, I always do a board game or card game pick. Anyway, this is a game we got for my daughter a year or so ago for Christmas. And then we got her the sequel game this last year for Christmas. It's called Sleeping Queens. Now, Sleeping Queens came out in 2005. It is a card game. It's a game that she can play. She was 6 when we bought it, and she really likes winning, which means she's my daughter for sure. Anyway, we basically it's a matching game, and so you can use knights to slay dragons, dragons to steal queens, kings to wake up queens, and then you put together math problems to trade out cards, and that's it. It has a weight on Board Game Geek of 1.06. This last year we got our Sleeping Queens 2. It is new enough to where it does not have a Board Game Geek weight. It's a little more complicated because you use the math problems now to so you use a pair of cards, I think, to wake up the queen, and then you use or wake up all of your queens, and then it has other things to put the queens to sleep or let you trade cards. And the queens are trying to rescue the kings in this one is Sleeping Queens 2, The Rescue. And the way you rescue a king is you get the queen and her animal companion, and you trade them in and wake up a king. Anyway, it's a fun game. It's a little, like I said, a little more complicated than the Sleeping Queen, so I would weight it probably a 1.2, 1.3. It's still relatively easy to pick up. And she loves playing it. The other kids, I have teenagers, they're usually game to play it. It's not their favorite game, but it's one that they like enough to play with her. And so, Sleeping Queens and Sleeping Queens 2 are my picks for board games. And like I said, they're terrific for kids. It says 8+, but my 6-year-old picked it up no problem. So I'm going to pick those. As far as other picks go, one thing that I started doing here this last week is I set up a Plex server. And so now I'm importing music. I actually have CDs in my office that I am ripping onto the Plex server. And
what are you using to listen?
So Plex has apps that you can install on your Apple TV or your Amazon Fire Stick. You can get a desktop app for your computer. You can get a Plex app for your phone. And the other thing is you can do port forwarding and hook it up so that you can connect to it from outside of your home network. I haven't done that yet, but I had some issues getting it to run. I had a Linux machine that I set up. It's just an old PC. And the issue that I had was that it kept hanging when I try and do anything with it before I even got to installing Plex. But I have a Windows machine that's sitting under my desk that I don't do a ton with. And so I just installed it on there and it runs fine. So that's what we're doing. I haven't ripped the DVDs yet to it. Probably just use Handbrake for that. I've been pretty happy with it so far. Like I said, I haven't heavily used it yet, but you just tell it what folders to watch, and it'll index your music and stuff. You can put photos on it, and so yeah, I'm working through all that stuff. But yeah, been happy with it so far. I turned it on. I put the Plex app on my Apple TV downstairs, and it worked like a charm. So the only issue I really have with it is that the Plex app on my TV, on my Apple TV, so Plex, they prompt you periodically to get a paid subscription. You don't need it, but they want you to have it. And they have a bunch of content that's on there for free. And so I'm trying to figure out how to turn parental controls on it. And that's really the only rub that I've gotten so far. So if you can do that and you know how to do that, I would love to hear from you. Both for some of the stuff that we have on DVD or Blu-ray, and
I've got
yeah,
the
it's
parental controls on mine.
okay. I just need to figure it out then. But yeah,
it's just a separate
so,
account. You create a separate account, okay. and then you select. There's two ways you can do it. One, you can select folders and only put folders that are for kids or movies that are for kids in the kids folder, and you can just add that folder to the account. The other thing that you can do, there's also a PG rating system of older kids, younger kids kind of thing. But
I gotcha.
It works as well as it works.
Right. But yeah, so I've been happy with that. Let's see. My wife and I just finished watching Blacklist, the latest season of that, and we enjoyed that. That was pretty good. There was something else I was going to pick, and I am totally drawing a blank on it. So I will just pick it later. But yeah. Gal, what are your picks?
Well, I think I only have one pick. Speaking of TV shows, there's Severance on Apple. I don't know if you guys had the opportunity to watch it, but it is an excellent show. We watched it here, and I had a really good time. It's about, so obviously not having any spoilers, but it's about people who chose to participate in a program where they separate their consciousness to when they are outside of work and when they are in work. So they're basically two different people that are not aware of each other when they're in work or not. And that is a really interesting idea, and the plot is like super interesting, and it finishes in a way where you're just wishing to see the next season. One of the best shows I got to watch in the past few years, I think. So Severance would be my single pick for today.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this. Until next time, folks, max out.